One of the ways that Lynch characterizes the internet in particular is that he likes to think of it as a testimony machine, in the sense that it expands our access to other people's testimony. And it does that in a lot of different ways. One, by sort of just extending access to all sorts of kinds of traditional sorts of information resources. So books or articles or blog posts, these are all going to be considered a kind of testimony because they're written by one person or a group of person and they're directed at an audience. So you have someone who's saying, hey, this is what I think about this particular topic. And that's a kind of testimony. But in particular, the internet also has, I think, in many cases, very deeply embedded in its architecture, this idea of giving us access to what you might call aggregated networked judgments. So when you see an Amazon, a set of Amazon reviews, it'll say this has 1,000 reviews and it has 3.8 stars. And then that about 1,000 people have reviewed the product, and the score is an aggregated weighting of all of the different people's judgments about it. Each of those individual judgments is a kind of testimony, and then what Amazon does is aggregates them together to give a special kind of testimony that's in some sense a sort of aggregation or somehow merging all of these together using what many people would call the wisdom of the crowds. And so the idea here is that the internet is much more, it's sort of more special than things like the publishing, like the print revolution, because rather than just expanding the number of people from whom you could get testimony from, it also introduces these processes of using algorithms or different kinds of rankings to give people ways of dealing with all of those different kinds of testimony in an aggregated, technologically determined way. So that's a particular thing that the web does. And the question here is that for a lot of people, we've just assumed that, well, this is actually really amazing and powerful and good. It actually increases our ability to know. But the big question we have about these processes is that we can sort of think about the wisdom of the crowds and recognize that when we're thinking about how these kinds of group aggregations work, they actually really only work well when certain conditions are met. And so the big question for Lynch and for us in particular is to think about when or whether those conditions are met with digital technology.